Kale walked cautiously through the palace corridors. The walls were made of a shimmering crystal-like material that reflected the soft glow of the alien lights. It was not just bright, it felt alive. Every step Kale took echoed softly, almost as if the palace itself was aware of his presence. He had been called here for routine maintenance. The Queen's energy grids were complex, and only humans with specific technical skills were trusted with them. Kale had never expected today to be different, but something in the air made him uneasy. As he turned a corner, he heard a soft pattering of tiny feet behind him. At first he thought it was just a servant or one of the palace assistants, but before he could react, a small blue-skinned alien child dashed across the hallway and grabbed Kale's leg. The child's large eyes shone like twin stars, and her laughter was musical, almost like a wind chime. Even the guards who were standing at attention along the walls froze in surprise. The child was supposed to remain in the royal quarters, never seen by outsiders, and yet here she was, clinging to a human. Kale crouched to meet her gaze. "Hey there," he said gently. He did not want to frighten her, but the child only giggled and tugged at him, pointing toward the palace's deeper corridors. Kale felt a mix of confusion and curiosity. Why would the Queen's child run after him? Was she in danger, or was this some kind of test? The guards whispered among themselves, unsure whether to intervene. Normally, no one could approach the royal child without permission. Yet none of them moved. The child's courage, or perhaps her innocence, seemed to command even the Queen's most disciplined soldiers. Kale hesitated, then slowly allowed himself to be led. They moved through a series of twisting corridors, each one more unusual than the last. Kale noticed walls that seemed to breathe, panels that shifted subtly as if alive. Floating platforms moved silently overhead, and the air hummed with energy. He realized that this palace was not like anything he had ever seen. Even his work in advanced human space stations did not prepare him for this. Yet the child moved with confidence, knowing exactly where she wanted to go. Finally, they reached a smaller room, tucked away behind a concealed door. Inside, it was warm and bright, filled with soft lights and strange floating objects. Toys, or what looked like toys, hovered in the air, and tiny plants glowed with a gentle bioluminescence. The child pointed excitedly at a floating console, her hands reaching out as if she expected Kale to understand her immediately. Kale approached the console carefully. He recognized its design. It was similar to the power devices he had seen elsewhere in the palace, but this one was smaller, more delicate. It seemed to monitor some form of life energy within the palace. He bent down, inspecting the controls, and realized they were slightly malfunctioning. A small spark jumped from one panel, and the child flinched, then giggled again, as if amused rather than frightened. Kale's fingers moved expertly across the controls, repairing the minor fault. The child watched, fascinated by his work, tilting her head and following every motion. He could not help but smile, despite being in the middle of an alien palace, with walls that defied human understanding, and with the child's laughter filling the room. He felt an unexpected warmth. For a moment, the tension of the palace and its strict rules faded away, but his focus returned abruptly when the console lit up with a red warning. A soft alarm echoed in the room, and Kale's heart raced. The device had detected movement elsewhere in the palace, unauthorized intruders. He glanced at the child, who was now standing on tiptoe, pointing urgently at the console. She seemed to be trying to tell him something. Kale realized then that she had led him here for more than play. She had sensed the danger before he did. He turned toward the door, but the hallways were no longer empty. Through the crystal walls, shadows moved quickly. A group of cloaked figures, their forms dark and indistinct, was approaching the royal chambers. Kale recognized them as rogue aliens, likely spies or saboteurs, attempting to breach the Queen's private quarters. Panic began to rise in him, but he quickly forced himself to stay calm. The child was relying on him. Kale grabbed a nearby plasma rod from a maintenance shelf. It was a simple tool, but in skilled hands, it could emit a protective energy field. He moved toward the corridor, the child clutching his hand. The guards outside were still frozen, unsure of how to respond. Cale had only a few seconds to act. As they stepped into the hallway, the intruders came into view. They were swift, shadowy, and clearly trained for stealth. But Cale had one advantage: a child's knowledge of the palace. She tugged him left and right, guiding him through passages the intruders could not anticipate. Each turn was precise, revealing shortcuts and hidden corners. Cale realized that her familiarity with the palace was more than play. It was instinct. She had likely been observing the palace for years, learning its secrets without anyone noticing. The intruders paused, noticing movement that should not have been there. A human, small and seemingly unarmed, was navigating the corridors with uncanny skill, and a small child was with him. They had underestimated this pair, thinking a human could not possibly navigate the alien palace so efficiently, let alone block their path. Cale activated the plasma rod. A soft blue light pulsed along its edge, creating a shield that shimmered across the corridor. The intruders recoiled, their shadows stretching against the walls. Cale could hear the child's small laughter once more, a sound that emboldened him. Somehow, in this strange alien palace, with a royal child by his side, he felt capable of more than he ever had before. He guided the child through a series of turns, leading them away from the main threat. The intruders tried to follow, but the child's knowledge of hidden passages kept them ahead. Cale realized then that this was not just a rescue, it was a test of courage, instinct, and trust. He was not simply a human here. He was a partner to the most unexpected ally he had ever encountered. Finally, they reached a small chamber near the palace's central control hub. Cale quickly used the console to lock doors and activate defensive fields. The intruders were forced to retreat into shadows, frustrated and unable to proceed. The child clapped her tiny hands, her laughter filling the room again. Cale felt a surge of relief. They had survived the first wave of danger, thanks to her guidance and his quick thinking. For a moment, Cale allowed himself to breathe. The palace was quiet again, except for the soft hum of energy fields and the child's small footsteps as she explored the room. He knelt down to meet her gaze. "You're very brave," he said, smiling. The child giggled, touching his face as if acknowledging his words. In that instant, Cale realized that he was not just repairing machines or maintaining systems. He was forming a bond, one that might change the way humans and aliens interacted in the future. Cale looked toward the door, knowing the Queen would soon appear. He did not know how she would react to a human being so close to her child, but he felt ready. For the first time, he understood that bravery was not about size or strength. It was about presence, courage, and the willingness to act when needed. As he stood, the child ran ahead, beckoning him to follow. Cale took a deep breath and followed her, knowing that whatever awaited beyond the next corridor would test him further. But for now, he had survived the first encounter, and he had earned the trust of a being more powerful and more unexpected than any he had ever met. The little one of the alien queen. Cale followed the little alien child through the twisting corridors of the palace, his mind racing with questions. She moved with a confidence and purpose that only someone who knew every secret of the palace could possess. Her small hands guided him as if she had done this hundreds of times, yet her giggles made it seem playful. Still, Catalina could feel that this was serious. Something important was happening, and the Queen's child had chosen him for a reason. As they turned another corner, they entered a wide chamber that Cale had never seen before. The room was softly lit by panels that floated mid-air, casting a gentle, shifting glow across walls lined with strange alien symbols. Suspended platforms hovered, slowly rotating as if they had a life of their own. Cale tried to take it all in, but his attention was drawn immediately to the console in the center. It floated slightly above the floor, its interface alive with softly pulsing lights. The child tugged at his hand and pointed at the console, her eyes wide with urgency. Kale understood immediately. She wanted him to interact with it. He moved closer, his fingers hovering over the panels. As he studied the controls, he realized that this device was not merely a monitor. It was connected to the palace's central defensive network. Any malfunction here could allow intruders to bypass protections or disrupt the Queen's energy fields. Before he could begin repairs, the console suddenly beeped. A warning flashed across the floating screen, showing movement in a distant wing of the palace. Kale's heart quickened. The intruders had not retreated entirely. They were regrouping, attempting to find another way into the private quarters. The child's small hand pressed against his arm, and he realized she was trying to tell him something. Perhaps she had sensed the danger before the console did. Kale worked quickly, repairing the device while keeping an eye on the child. Her small presence was calming, yet it reminded him of the stakes. This was not just about machines. It was about a child who belonged to the most powerful alien in the sector. One wrong move could end badly, for both of them. As he fixed the console, a faint shudder ran through the room. The floating platforms tilted slightly, almost in response to the alert. Kale realized that the palace itself seemed to react to threats, its systems alive in ways he did not fully understand. He focused on the task, pushing aside fear, and finally restored the device's stability. The warning light dimmed, replaced by a soft green glow. The child clapped her tiny hands, excited, but there was no time to linger. The corridor outside was still quiet, but Kale knew this calm was fragile. He glanced at the little alien, whose wide eyes seemed to study his face as if measuring his courage. Then, without warning, she darted ahead, tugging him through a hidden side passage that even the guards would have difficulty finding. Kale had to run to keep up, but she never slowed. The hidden passages were narrow and winding, lit by faint bioluminescent strips along the walls. Kale could hear the soft hum of the palace's energy systems and the occasional distant clank of the guards' armor. He tried to follow the child's lead, while also remaining aware of the danger behind them. At every turn, she would pause, glance back, and ensure he was still following. She was tiny, yet her confidence made her seem far larger than her size. After several minutes, they reached a small observation room. The walls were made of clear material, giving a panoramic view of the palace grounds. Kale could see the distant spires and towers, glowing softly under alien light. The child ran to the center and pressed her hands against the glass, her reflection merging with the view outside. Kale noticed something odd. The intruders were still moving, trying to blend into the shadows of the outer walls. They were clever, but the child's presence here seemed to disrupt their strategy. Kale crouched beside her. "You knew they were coming," he said quietly. The child tilted her head, then pointed to a cluster of floating consoles along the edge of the room. Kale realized she was directing him again. These consoles controlled secondary defenses, including energy barriers and motion sensors. He quickly accessed the first console, activating a protective shield over one of the outer corridors. A soft hum filled the room, and he could see a faint blue glow forming along the corridor walls outside. The intruders paused, clearly confused by the sudden appearance of an unseen barrier. Hale felt a surge of confidence. The child's guidance, combined with his knowledge, gave them a chance to secure the palace. The child clapped and giggled softly, but Hale noticed something in her expression, a seriousness that matched the urgency of the situation. She was proud but cautious, fully aware that the intruders were still a threat. He realized that her bravery was not childish, it was instinctual. She knew this palace better than anyone, and now she was trusting him to help protect it. As he moved to the next console, the child suddenly pointed to a distant door, one that led toward the Queen's private chambers. Kale understood immediately. The intruders were attempting to bypass the outer defenses and reach the inner sanctum. He had to act fast. He activated the next set of barriers, a lattice of energy fields that would block entry but allow safe passage for those who knew the code. The child's eyes sparkled with approval, and she tugged his hand to lead him further. They moved quickly down a narrow service corridor, avoiding patrols and automated defense drones. Kale marveled at the child's intuition. She seemed to know every blind spot, every hidden doorway. Even the palace guards, trained for years in strategy and combat, would have difficulty matching her awareness. Yet here she was, trusting a human to follow and protect her. As they rounded a corner, a sudden noise stopped them in their tracks. A section of the corridor ahead had been sealed off by the intruders, their presence now more direct and threatening. Hale felt the tension rise in his chest. The child pressed against him, her small hand gripping his arm tightly. He realized that in this moment they were partners, not simply protector and protected, but a team. Hale drew his plasma rod again, ready to defend them both. The child, surprisingly calm, pointed toward a narrow maintenance shaft above their heads. Without hesitation, Hale leapt, grabbing the edge and pulling himself and the child up into the shaft. They moved silently, the child leading the way as they crawled along the suspended passage. Hale's muscles burned, but he didn't complain. The stakes were too high, and the child's trust was absolute. After several tense minutes, they emerged in a small chamber overlooking the Queen's private audience hall. From this vantage point, Hale could see the intruders below, confused and searching for a way forward. The child looked at him with wide eyes, as if reminding him of the responsibility they now shared. Hale understood without words. They could not let these intruders reach the Queen. He quickly accessed a secondary control panel in the chamber. Using the floating interface, he activated a series of automated defenses, motion-triggered energy pulses, soft yet strong enough to push intruders back, and doors that would lock remotely. The intruders reacted immediately, their movements faltering as they were repelled. Hale felt a surge of relief, tempered by the knowledge that this was only a temporary reprieve. The child giggled softly, hopping in excitement. Hale knelt beside her, brushing her hair back gently. "We're not finished yet," he said, though he could not hide a small smile. She only nodded, as if understanding the full weight of the danger they were in. Together they moved to the next panel, preparing for whatever came next. Suddenly, the floor beneath them trembled slightly. Hale's heart raced. The intruders were adapting, trying to find another route. The child's small hand pressed against his arm again, her eyes locking with his. He realized in that instant that courage was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to act despite it. And in this moment, with the little one of the alien queen by his side, Hale felt braver than ever. He activated another console, releasing a soft protective field around the entrance to the chamber. The intruders paused, unsure of how to proceed. Hale breathed a small sigh of relief. The child clapped once more, her small voice a musical sound that lightened the tension just slightly. Yet both of them knew the danger was not over. Hale studied her face, realizing that her innocence and bravery were intertwined. She had led him through the palace, protected him, and trusted him to make the right decisions. He felt a deep sense of respect and responsibility. This was no longer a simple human task of maintenance or repair. He was now a guardian, a partner, and perhaps even a friend. As the intruders began to retreat, realizing they could not advance without triggering more defenses, Hale allowed himself a brief glance around the chamber. The alien architecture was unlike anything he had seen. Suspended walkways, softly glowing walls, and floating consoles that seemed to respond to thought. And yet, amidst all this grandeur and alien sophistication, it was the small child, the youngest of the alien queen's line, who held the key to understanding and navigating this world. Hale took her hand gently, guiding her down a narrow passage that would bring them closer to the queen's inner sanctum. He knew that more challenges awaited them, but he also knew that together They could face whatever came next. The palace was alive. The intruders were persistent, and the Queen's little one had chosen him. And for Kale, that choice was more than honor. It was trust, courage, and the beginning of an adventure that would change the course of their lives. Kale moved cautiously along the narrow passage with the little alien child at his side. The walls around them pulsed softly, glowing with a gentle, shifting light that made every shadow seem alive. He kept his eyes on every corner, every faint movement. Though the intruders had been repelled for now, Kale knew they would not give up so easily. They were clever, relentless, and determined to breach the Queen's private chambers. The child led him through a series of twists and turns that would have been impossible to navigate without her guidance. Every passage was unfamiliar to Kale, yet she moved confidently, sometimes darting ahead to check the next corridor, sometimes pausing to gesture him along. Her small hand rested lightly on his arm, guiding him with instinctive precision. Kale realized again that he was no longer alone in this strange palace. This tiny being, who seemed so fragile, was his greatest ally. Finally, they emerged into a larger chamber that overlooked the main audience hall. From here, Kale could see the full extent of the palace's defenses. Floating barriers glimmered faintly, and hovering drones patrolled the area silently, their sensors scanning for intruders. Below, the intruders were regrouping, clearly frustrated by their inability to penetrate deeper into the Queen's sanctuary. Cal felt a surge of adrenaline. He had to act fast. The child pointed to a console on the far side of the room, her tiny fingers pressing against the controls. Kale approached cautiously, understanding her intention. This console controlled the energy locks and security barriers for the inner halls. If he activated the defenses correctly, they could trap the intruders and prevent them from advancing any further. He worked quickly, his hands moving over the glowing panels, while the child watched intently, her eyes wide with curiosity and focus. As he activated the first set of barriers, a soft hum filled the chamber. Energy fields flickered to life along the main corridors, creating a shimmering lattice that blocked passage. Kale could see the intruders hesitate, confused by the sudden appearance of barriers where there had been none. The child clapped softly, her laughter like a small bell in the tense air. Kale smiled briefly, but there was no time to relax. He knew they were far from safe. A low rumble echoed through the palace, and Kale realized the intruders were trying another tactic. They had split into smaller groups, attempting to find alternate routes. The child tugged him toward a narrow stairwell leading upward, and Kale followed. The steps were steep, carved from a translucent material that glowed beneath their feet. Each step seemed to resonate with energy, and Kale could feel the faint vibrations beneath him. He kept a firm grip on the child, who climbed with surprising agility. At the top of the stairwell, they entered a chamber filled with suspended platforms and floating bridges. It was dizzying to look at, the platforms shifting slowly, creating new paths and blocking others. The child moved across them without hesitation, her small form leaping from platform to platform with grace and confidence. Kale followed as best as he could, his movements slower but steady. The slightest misstep could send them falling, yet he trusted the child's instincts. As they navigated the platforms, Kale caught sight of the intruders below. They had found a hidden stairway and were attempting to reach the same chamber. He gripped his plasma rod tightly, preparing to confront them if necessary. The child, sensing his tension, paused and gestured toward a nearby console. Kale understood immediately. She wanted him to activate a trap or barrier. He moved quickly, his fingers manipulating the controls. A series of energy pulses emitted from the platforms, creating a network of protective fields. The intruders were caught off guard. Their movements halted as the energy barriers blocked their path. Kale could see their frustration growing. They had underestimated both him and the child, and now their plans were unraveling. The child giggled softly, hopping lightly on the platform as if celebrating their small victory. Kale felt a mix of relief and admiration. She was not just a child. She was a guide, a strategist, and a source of courage. Her intuition had allowed them to stay one step ahead of the intruders, and her trust in him made him feel capable of more than he ever had before. But the danger was not over. A shadow moved across the chamber, and Kale realized a second group of intruders had found another path. They were clever, coordinated, and clearly experienced. The child tugged at his hand again, pointing toward a narrow bridge that led to a smaller chamber on the far side. Kale nodded, understanding that they had to move quickly. They crossed the bridge carefully, the child leading the way with remarkable confidence. Kale kept his eyes on the shadows below, ready to react at a moment's notice. The child stopped suddenly, her eyes fixed on a floating console above their heads. Kale followed her gaze and realized it controlled the energy fields for the entire chamber. If he activated it, they could create a temporary barrier to hold the intruders at bay while they moved to safety. He worked quickly, adjusting the settings and activating the barriers. The energy fields flickered to life, forming a protective wall around the intruders and preventing them from advancing further. The intruders hesitated, trapped by the sudden defenses, and Kale could see their confusion and frustration. The child clapped softly, her laughter like a small song in the tense air. They were surviving, and they were winning. Not through brute force, but through strategy and quick thinking. As they moved to the next chamber, Kale felt a strange sense of connection with the child. Her trust in him, her guidance, and her bravery had allowed them to navigate the palace and survive the intruders' attacks. He realized that he was no longer just a human engineer. He was a protector, a partner, and perhaps even a friend. They entered a small observation chamber overlooking the Queen's inner sanctum. From here, Kale could see the full extent of the intruders' efforts. They were regrouping, trying to find another way forward, but the child's guidance had given them the advantage. Kale activated another console, sending a series of energy pulses to reinforce the barriers and trap the intruders. The pulses moved like waves across the chamber, blocking any further advance. The child giggled again, her small hands clapping with delight. Kale felt a sense of relief, tempered by the knowledge that the intruders were still a threat. He studied her face, seeing a mixture of innocence, courage, and intelligence that was beyond her years. She had led him through the palace, guided him through danger, and trusted him to act correctly. Kale felt a deep sense of responsibility. He could not let her down. Suddenly, the chamber trembled. Kale realized the intruders were attempting another strategy, trying to bypass the barriers entirely. The child pressed against his arm, her small hand steadying him, and he understood her silent warning. They had to act quickly or risk being caught. He activated a series of secondary defenses, creating a maze of energy fields that forced the intruders to retreat. The child's eyes sparkled with approval, and she giggled softly, her laughter a comforting sound in the tense environment. Kale felt a renewed sense of determination. They were facing an enemy that seemed relentless, but together, they were capable of more than he had imagined. As they moved toward the Queen's private chambers, Kale could see the palace stretching out before them, vast and complex. The child led him through a series of hidden passages, avoiding guards and automated defenses. Kale marveled at her knowledge of the palace. Every turn, every shortcut, every hidden passage was familiar to her, and she moved with a confidence that belied her age. Finally, they reached a small chamber overlooking the Queen's throne room. From here, Kale could see the intruders attempting to regroup, but the barriers and defenses had delayed them long enough. The child gestured toward a console, and Kale understood that they had one final task: to secure the inner sanctum and prevent any further intrusion. He worked quickly, activating the final set of defenses. Energy fields shimmered into place, locking doors and blocking passages. The intruders hesitated, clearly frustrated and confused. The child clapped her hands softly, her laughter echoing in the chamber. Kale felt a sense of accomplishment, but he knew the final challenge was yet to come. He knelt beside the child, brushing her hair back, gently. "We've done well so far," he said, though he could not hide the tension in his voice. She only nodded, her eyes wide and focused. Together they had navigated the palace, survived the intruders, and prepared the defenses for the final confrontation. Kale realized that bravery was not about strength or size. It was about action, presence, and trust. And in that moment, with the little one of the alien queen by his side, he felt braver than ever. They were a team, and together, they could face whatever came next. The child looked up at him, her small hand resting on his arm, and Kale knew that whatever the final challenge held, they would face it together. The palace was alive, the intruders were persistent, and the queen's little one had chosen him. And for Kale, that choice was more than honor. It was trust, courage, and the beginning of an adventure that would test him in ways he could not yet imagine. Kale and the little alien child moved cautiously through the final corridors leading to the Queen's inner sanctum. The air was thick with tension, and every flicker of the palace light seemed to carry a warning. Kale's hands gripped his plasma rod tightly. The child walked confidently beside him, her small hand occasionally brushing against his arm, a reminder that they faced this danger together. He could feel her presence giving him courage. As they approached the massive doors that guarded the inner chambers, Kale noticed movement in the shadows. The intruders had regrouped and were attempting a final push. Their dark cloaks blended with the dim glow of the palace, but Kale had learned to anticipate their tactics. He held the child close as they paused to assess the situation. Every detail mattered. A wrong move now could jeopardize everything they had fought to protect. The child suddenly pointed toward a small control panel on the wall. Kale understood immediately. She was guiding him to activate the final defensive systems. He approached the panel, his fingers moving quickly over the glowing controls. Energy fields shimmered into place along the corridor, creating a maze that would slow the intruders. The intruders hesitated, their eyes narrowing as they tried to find another route. Kale knew this would buy them precious time. He glanced at the child, who nodded encouragingly. She seemed to understand the risks as clearly as he did, yet she showed no fear. Her trust in him strengthened his resolve. Kale activated another sequence of defenses, sending pulses of energy through the floor and walls, cutting off alternate paths. The intruders attempted to advance, but the barriers and fields forced them into a single channel, where Kale could confront them more effectively. With the intruders funneled into a narrow corridor, Kale positioned himself strategically, ready to block their path. The child stood beside him, small but determined. The intruders came into view, their movements quick and calculated. But Kale's focus never wavered. He raised the plasma rod, and a blue arc of energy sparked along its edge. The first intruder stepped forward, their cloak flaring as they lunged. Kale activated the rod's energy pulse, sending a wave that pushed the intruder back without causing harm. The child watched intently, her eyes reflecting both awe and determination. The intruders regrouped, clearly realizing that brute force would not work against them. They had underestimated Kale and the little alien's knowledge of the palace. Kale moved with precision, guiding the intruders away from the inner sanctum. Every movement was calculated, every step a balance between defense and strategy. The child pointed toward another panel, and Kale quickly activated additional barriers, blocking yet another path. The intruders hissed in frustration, their attempts to breach the defenses failing repeatedly. As Kale continued to defend the corridor, the child darted ahead, leading him to a small side room. Here, Kale could access a central control hub for the palace's defenses. From this vantage point, he could manipulate the barriers, drones, and energy fields to trap the intruders completely. He knelt at the controls, his fingers moving quickly while the child watched, occasionally pointing to areas he might have missed. Within minutes, Kale had activated a full security lockdown. The intruders were confined to a single chamber, unable to advance further. Automated drones hovered silently above them, their sensors monitoring every movement. Energy fields glimmered around the intruders, preventing escape. Kale felt a surge of relief, but he remained vigilant. The danger was contained, but not entirely eliminated. The child clapped her hands softly, her laughter a gentle sound in the tense air. Cale smiled briefly, his attention still on the controls. He realized that this victory was as much hers as it was his. Her knowledge, intuition, and bravery had guided him through the palace and allowed them to secure the inner chambers. Without her, they would have been lost. Suddenly, the massive doors to the Queen's chambers opened, revealing the alien Queen herself. She was radiant, her presence commanding and regal. Yet her gaze softened as it fell on her child and the human who had protected her. The child ran forward, giggling, and the Queen knelt slightly to greet her. Cale stepped back respectfully, unsure of how the Queen would react to his presence. "You have shown courage," the Queen said, her voice resonant and clear. "Where others would hesitate, you acted. You protected what is most precious to me." She gestured toward her child, who clung to Cale's arm briefly before running to the Queen's side. Cale felt a mixture of pride and humility. The Queen's acknowledgement was more than he had ever expected. The intruders, confined by the barriers, struggled in vain. The Queen raised her hand, and a soft pulse of energy reinforced the containment fields. The intruders' attempts to escape were thwarted, and they finally retreated, realizing they could not overcome the palace's defenses. The Queen turned back to Cale, her gaze steady and approving. "You have earned trust, human," she said. "Few outsiders would have had the courage, foresight, and strength to navigate the palace and protect my child. You are now recognized not only for your skill, but for your heart." Cale felt a profound sense of honor. He had come to the palace for routine maintenance, yet he had become a guardian, a protector, and a hero in the eyes of beings far more powerful than himself. The child, sensing the moment of recognition, giggled and reached for Cale's hand once more. He held it gently, understanding the unspoken connection between them. They had faced danger together, trusted one another, and now stood victorious. The child's laughter lightened the atmosphere, and even the Queen's guards relaxed, their expressions softening in acknowledgement of Cale's bravery. The Queen spoke again, her tones softer now. "You have done more than preserve the safety of this palace. You have proven that humans, though small and fragile in appearance, possess courage and intelligence that rival the strongest of my kind." Cale felt a swell of pride. He had not acted for recognition, but hearing her words affirmed that his actions had made a real difference. The child ran forward, placing her tiny hands on Cale's shoulders. She looked up at him, her eyes full of admiration and trust. Cale smiled, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze. He realized that the bond they had formed was more than temporary. It was lasting, built on shared courage, trust, and understanding. The Queen watched the interaction silently, her expression softening further. She gestured toward Cale. "Come closer. Let it be known that this human is recognized in my palace, not as an outsider, but as an ally." Cale stepped forward respectfully. The child held his hand tightly, leading him to stand beside her. "You have my gratitude, human," the Queen said, "and my respect. Today you have shown that bravery is not measured by size or strength, but by the willingness to act when it is needed most." Cale nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He had started this journey as a simple engineer, yet he had become part of something far greater. The palace guards, who had observed silently throughout the events, now stepped forward, bowing in acknowledgement of Cale's actions. Even in a realm filled with beings of immense power, they recognized the significance of what he had accomplished. Cale felt a sense of belonging, something he had never expected to find among the stars. The child tugged gently at Cale's hand, leading him toward a small balcony that overlooked the palace gardens. Soft alien light bathed the area, highlighting the plants and floating structures in a surreal display. Cale took a deep breath, feeling the calm after the storm of tension and danger. He glanced at the child, who looked at him with a mixture of pride and joy. "You did it," Cataline said softly. "We did it. The child nodded, her small head tilting slightly in acknowledgement. She pointed toward the palace grounds below, as if showing him the results of their efforts, the barriers holding strong, the intruders retreating, and the palace itself standing secure. The queen approached, placing a gentle hand on her child's shoulder. She looked at Kael, her expression a mix of gratitude and admiration. "You have not only protected my child, human," she said, "but you have shown what humans are capable of. You have bridged the gap between our worlds, proving that trust and courage can unite even the most different of beings." Kael felt a warmth in his chest. He had faced danger, uncertainty, and fear, yet he had emerged not only unscathed but respected and trusted by one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The child giggled, running ahead to explore the balcony, her laughter a reminder of the innocence and hope that had guided them through this ordeal. The queen watched her child with a soft smile, then turned her gaze back to Kael. "Stay as long as you wish, human. You are welcome here, not as a guest, but as a protector and ally. Today you have changed the course of events in this palace, and perhaps in our world?" Kael nodded, humbled by her words. As the sun of the alien world began to rise over the palace gardens, Kael stood beside the child and the queen, feeling a profound sense of accomplishment. He had come for maintenance, but he had found trust, courage, and a bond that transcended species. The palace was secure, the intruders defeated, and the child safe. For Kael, this was more than a victory. It was the beginning of a story that would be remembered for generations. The little alien child looked up at him, her eyes sparkling with mischief and joy. She tugged his hand gently, leading him toward the palace interior. Kael followed, realizing that his adventure was far from over. Together, they had faced the unknown and emerged stronger. Together, they would face whatever came next, bound by trust, courage, and the extraordinary bond formed between a human and the alien queen's little one. As they walked into the palace, Kael felt the quiet hum of the energy fields around them. The palace seemed alive, but now it was calm, safe, and welcoming. He glanced at the child, who held his hand tightly, and smiled. They had survived the greatest challenge so far, and in doing so, Kael had earned not only respect, but a place in a world he had never imagined. The queen followed behind, her eyes soft but watchful. Kael knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges, more mysteries, and more adventures. But for now, he felt a sense of peace, accomplishment, and trust. A human who had stood alongside the child of the most powerful alien in the galaxy, and had emerged victorious. And in that moment, Kayla understood something simple yet profound. Courage, trust, and kindness could bridge worlds, unite species, and create heroes where none had been expected. The child's small hand in his was a reminder of that truth, and together they would face whatever the future held, stronger than ever before.